So this is what today's going to look like. We're going to start off with an agenda. I'm going to put it on the board. We'll go around the room. We'll ask people, what is it about this topic that you would like to see addressed? We try to be very responsive as much as possible, so we're not just bringing a pre-canned thing, but we're having a lab that is emergent based on what your needs are. And we try our best to do that. I will try to ask towards the end if there are any things that we haven't talked about that you're like, gosh, I wish we would have talked about that. Please, when I ask that, or even if I don't ask that, say, oh, I'd like to talk about this other thing as well, just so you can leave with something valuable. I want to share this kind of fun thing. Do you guys remember Lane Sunwall used to be here? He is now doing active teaching labs at University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. And those are also live streamed. So if you go to UWM's page and search out active teaching lab, you can watch the live streams there as well. So if you're interested in e-portfolios, for example, next Wednesday from 8:30 to 9:30 in the morning, you can go see a live stream of that. We've got a handout for course level evaluation, I guess back on the table there. Next Thursday, you should leave that early and come back to our 1 o'clock lab, because while that's interesting, I don't know if they're going to make a few cookies. So, and that's what I have as far as these slides are concerned. Oh, I guess there's one more thing, which is that we do have a Canvas course. And at the very top of your activity sheet, there is a way, instructions on how to self-enroll in that Canvas course. The reason you might want to do that is because in the Canvas course, we have the activity sheet, and at the very bottom of the activity sheet, we've got opportunities for you to add questions, notes, things like that. Tim.
How do we get access to the previous activity sheets?
All of the previous activity sheets should be, that's a very good question, under modules. And there they all are. The fall 18 labs, spring 19 labs.
Okay.
And all of those are available. Good question, thank you. All right, so
John, I can't see today's lab.
today's,
Like it defaulted to yesterday's.
Yeah.
And that's the last one under modules. Let's see if that's published.
use as front page. Okay,
Refresh.
now if you hit refresh, let's see if it helps.
There you go.
Excellent. Thank you for catching that. I just changed it this morning before I had coffee, so I didn't finish it apparently. So, what brought you to today's lab? Are there any questions or topics or thoughts, subtopics within the idea of engaging students that you are interested in answering or digging into, discussing, exploring? Who would like to start? Who are you? And why are you here?
I'll start.
All right, Nathan.
My name's Nathan. I'm a postdoc in integrative biology. I'm going to be starting with John as a faculty member
All right,
next
congratulations.
year. So I'm going to be teaching and stuff soon here, and just want to be a good teacher. And so I'm more interested in like pedagogy and things that are more widely applicable rather than Canvas or
Right.
certain tools. But yeah, so that's why I'm here, just to absorb some things I
All
can
right.
do to, especially for like a general education requirement is big.
Right.
So
You'll probably have students who don't want to be in your class, but they have to check off that box, and so they're sitting there, bored out of their minds, not caring. And yeah, how will you edutain them? Very good. Megan or Aaron?
Yeah, I can go. I'm Erin. I teach online Spanish courses through Independent Learning, which is affiliated with DCS study. And I'm here for some general tips to go beyond like a discussion board, right? How do you get students to engage with the material in a deeper way that isn't just, here's a discussion board. And the other problem I have is that these are asynchronous classes, so the students don't have like a group to talk with. So how do you get them in the material?
Yeah, online courses are really
Yeah.
weird in that way, right? Because
Yeah.
there's something about if we're all sitting in a room together, somebody's going to be talking.
Right.
But if I'm online, I can do all kinds of other things without having to talk to other people. So good. Yeah, the online environment as well. Good. Okay, Karen next.
Sure. I'm Karen Spader. I'm a doc student in curriculum and instruction. And I'm studying how to make online learning environments meaningful, socially engaged atmospheres. So I'm here as
You'll be
a,
answering that one.
right, I have ideas. I offered to be here because of my experiences and because of what I studied.
Karen used to work for us as a project assistant and then went on to do bigger and better things.
That's not necessarily true, but I miss teaching, so I went back to teaching.
Paul, I work in the school of nursing as a clinical instructor in the active learning classrooms there. I mostly teach courses that the students don't want to take in their heads. I don't teach them in health and wellness courses on the edge. So creating a more engaging learning environment for them to take these courses that they have to take.
So the active learning classrooms have all of the toys and the whiteboards for everybody and microphones and all kinds of cool things. In some ways, it should be by default the most engaging environment that students have, especially compared to like the lecture halls and things like that. So you probably have a lot of ideas that you're already doing. Good. Kenny.
My name's Kenny. I'm a grad student in the kinesiology department. I work with a couple large classes, so 100 students, 200 students. So how do you keep all of them engaged?
And especially in the environments that we have to put 200 students in there.
Right.
Very passive, absorbed, talk at me type environments. Good. Lori.
I'm Lori Berry. I'm an instructional designer with what is now called UW Extended Campus, so former Extension Community Online. And I'm here to offer expertise also in the online realm. I work in both, all of the courses are asynchronous, but like Aaron, some of them, there's just no student in the course at the same time. And so trying to offer ideas and suggestions for that, as well as those that are sort of class-based, so semester-based online classes. So just trying to offer some expertise in what to do for online students, as well as can carry over for face-to-face too.
Great. Tim.
So hi, I'm Tim. I work in ESL. Usually, my main focus is on a writing class, which for international students fulfills their COM A requirements, so it's a mandatory course. However, usually it's limited to 15, so it's a very intensive writing course, and there's nowhere to hide. And it's, like I know when students are engaged and when they're not. But same as Kenny, actually, my big question is how do you kind of replicate that kind of atmosphere in a large class? Or can you? Or should you?
Yeah. So is it scaling up from small, or is it something entirely different? Is it a different looking animal?
So yeah, the mandatory courses, I have students who A, don't want to do it because they just want to graduate, and B, they don't want to be an ASL because they don't think they should. And that's
Disengaged in multiple ways. Angela.
I'm Angela. I'm an instructor in biomolecular chemistry, so I teach a capstone lab course, which students generally are choosing to take, which is good. But it's also kind of a larger 30 to 40 person lab course. So big fan of creating communities to try to pull people along and ally in class times so that they're not sort of falling behind on what they're doing. But that also helps keep them engaged in what they're doing because they kind of have to work on it in class. But then they can also get immediate feedback.
All right. I'm putting that down as role of communities and peers. So good. Megan.
I'm Megan. I teach anatomy at the med school, so we have a big class. Theoretically, they all want to be there. But I we have a lot of online things that they, like, good, maybe half of their curriculum is online stuff that they need to do independently. And there's a subsection of students that definitely feel like they just want to read the book and go and come in for the exams. And so I'd like to kind of engage them more and also keep up with them, you know, because I worry that they're falling behind, and it's easy when students are engaged already and are asking, you know, I can see that they're coming to class and they're asking for help, but the ones that just want to, you know, read the book and get through it, I don't know, I can't keep tabs on them as well, and I worry that those are the ones that are often the ones that are falling behind.
I put that down as learning preferences, not learning styles. It's a whole different thing, but learning preferences, the people that just want to not engage in active learning and talk to other people, but just want to give me the things to study. I'll get on it on my own. And they can seem unengaged if we're doing active learning things, but really they may be engaged in other ways. So good. Sid.
I'm Sid Freitag, do academic technology. I'm in the same group as John. I organize workshops and fellowships, and I'm here to just listen, see what questions and interest people have.
And Michelle.
Michelle, I'm with academic technology as well on the course production team. I really wanted to go to the next week's UDL active teaching lab. I'm going to be out of town. So I thought this would be a great, it would sustain me until then because engagement now is a pillar of UDL. And
To grab an extra bagel
yeah,
for next week.
Yeah, so I think with my past teaching experience, I'm really great with getting getting interest, but I'm here to learn some strategies for sustaining that. And also, I mean, I know myself as a learner, I'm the first to get disengaged or shut down when I don't understand something. So how are we building in supports online, and I guess just ways to hold that initial engagement.
Great. So yeah, sustaining interest in actually back to Megan's, like allegedly they want to be there. At one point they did. So at one point they were engaged, but maybe something happened or they got lost and now they're like, so, and once you start going down that slope, then it's hard to catch up. Good. Margaret.
I'm Margaret. I work with John here in the acting teaching lab. I'm a grad student in the high school and I'm instructional design.
And Lauren.
I'm Lauren. I'm here for the bagels.
All right. As usual.
I'm still kind of hooked on how do we use the collaboration feature to engage students within campus.
All right. And you want that collaboration feature specifically?
Yeah, I'm trying to make the best of that thing and I'm struggling. Yeah.
It is not as easy as it should be. And so in many ways, that's actually we could start not necessarily with the tool, but with the idea of there are so many tools out there right now, right? And in many ways, like why do the lecture halls look the way that they do? Why does schooling look like one person talking and a whole bunch of people listening? If you think about like the history of the university, the history of schooling, there's been mentorships, right? And apprenticeships where you'd have like one master person and then a couple of people working under them. And it was a very small class environment where the instructor, the master, whatever, Smith, could customize and say, you know, you're not ready for the tea kettle yet. You work on the frying pans. You're about ready for the tea serving thing right now, but not in silver yet. Don't touch silver. You just keep working in tin. You know, and they could customize based on that. And then the Industrial Revolution started, and then there were child labor laws. And now all of a sudden these small one-room schoolhouses that had, 17 people now had 1,700 people. And these students who were used to working on factory lines and following instructions came in and they said, well, how am I going to do this anymore? Well, let's just have them all march to the same tune. So there's a little bit of military stuff in there. There's a little bit of factory. There's a lot of like, listen to the authority. I'm the authority. You absorb and good luck. Keep up. If you don't keep up, you're fired. You drop off at 8th grade or whatever age. And that thinking has changed, right? And so now people are like, how do I do this with 20 people? It's impossible to do unless I have help. So we have these technological tools, learning technologies to help. A lot of the things we are able to do in Canvas, we would never be able to do if we did not have those tools. So in some ways, these things are a real blessing. And yet this idea that I just want to come in and do the readings and take some tests, and that's all I need to do to get the knowledge that you're going to give me, is still so persistent. And in a large passive lecture, it doesn't matter whether they're engaged. You can't tell if they're engaged or not. They will follow or they won't follow, and it's sort of, you assess them with the midterm and the final test, and maybe that's it. And as a result, we get some people who learn and some people who, college isn't for me. And it ends up perpetuating the same type of people in the same type of positions, which we're missing out on a lot of diversity by not letting other people with other types of talents into those positions. So how do we get different types of people, the ones who know school's not for me, who still have all this great knowledge and energy and excitement into these positions? We've got to engage them. We've got to make sure that they know that they can do this, and in some ways change our teaching accordingly. Change the opportunities for them to become engaged accordingly.
Can I add on to what you're saying?
Yeah, please.
I think another issue you said we're essentially we're alluding to, we're missing out on reaching everybody. But I think another thing that we're missing out on is we aren't preparing students with the skills that our economy needs. And that's hugely problematic too. So we don't need people who have stored banks of knowledge anymore.
Right.
Not, there's so much of it, A, it's changing all the time, B. What we need are students who know how to find information, evaluate information, connect with people who have more information or have other skills, right? It's a collaborative economy that the vast majority of our students enter into. And certainly there are differences, for example, if you're studying to be a doctor or something like that, obviously there's knowledge you need to have there. But it's also not that they're not, that the medical world isn't looking for students who come out and can solve problems and think on their feet and critically engage rather than just regurgitate a equation for measuring out medicine or whatever, right? So I think not only are we missing reaching certain people who our tradition doesn't work for, I think our tradition just doesn't work for the world we live in now either. We're not preparing students to enter into it.
On March 28th, we've got a session on technical soft skills. So we have all of these soft skills that we teach in addition to the academic knowledge. And there are papers. There's a paper by Bowers, and it was 2000. It's listed somewhere in there. I don't know. Anyway, he's got this beautiful one-page paper that looks at, it's a analysis of a much larger meta-analysis where they looked at the last 100 years of grading, and they found out that academic knowledge only accounts for about 25% of our grades. 75% we grade on things like, do you show up? Do you work well with other people in the class? Are you not a jerk? You know, all of these sorts of non-academic skills that in many ways, these are what we want in our professions, right? Whatever our discipline, we don't want somebody who can spew out facts to Karen's point, but we want to do all these other things. How do we teach that? How do we, if it's just passive, absorb the knowledge, academic only, they're not going to do that. And so we want them to engage, not just with the content, but with each other so that they can develop those skills as well. So, the collaboration feature in Canvas. Man, Lauren, that's a tough one. Are any of you familiar with it? Has anyone looked at it a little bit? Okay, keep your hands raised if you think that it's okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay, all right, good. Keep it hands if you think it's good. Is it good? Is it as easy as it should be? How does it work?
Well, I've used it in the past just to set up Google Docs for the students, and then, I mean, it's basically, we use it as a link to Google Docs, that's all I use it for.
And in many ways, that's all that it is. What it will do, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is this little guy right here. I've got it turned off in this class. If I had turned it on in settings, it would show up on there. It would be black, and then all the students would be able to see it. I can set up an assignment that says, all right, I want group A, which is this set of table, to have a Google Doc. And a blank Google Doc, I believe it's blank. I don't think I can set it yet, or can I? Have they initially?
It's always blank, you can go in and. Yeah, and then do it, yeah.
Okay, so it gives you a blank doc, which then I can go in and say, group one, you copy paste these questions, and this is what I want you to answer. And then all three of them have that document that they can share. I also, as an instructor, I'm able to go into it. I don't actually know who owns it. Is it owned by me or the course?
It's owned by the person
Who creates it?
Okay, so the first person to click in that group is usually that person, right? But I have access to it. So then in the assignment, they can turn it in as a group, and I can see who did what and things like that. So I can see, Tim, once again, didn't contribute at all, but just put his name on it, and Lori did all the work. And Lauren just ate the bagels. So what doesn't work about it for you, Lauren? Julia?
Yeah.
Well,
Alright,
one of the things, does it still have the problem with the login authentication issue?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what that is
Still a problem.
if students are in Chrome and they're logged in with their personal Gmail account instead of their, at UW Wisconsin, their wisc.edu Gmail account, it spins forever, or has for the last 4 years that I've been watching it, which is why I've sort of given up on it.
I have found it's been a little bit easier. Google has made it a little bit easier to switch in between. So accessing it through Canvas isn't great, but if you're just going straight in through Google Docs,
Right.
not so bad.
And depending on how they're logged into Chrome, you can change your
Yeah.
identity there from your personal to your Whisk account.
Though they may
That
not
is-
pay attention to the fact that what they're logged in as.
Yeah, well, and that's that's always what we put out when we say, when we make the doc, like you have to be logged into your Whisk account for us.
It's a feature that requires a lot of sort of external description and writing so that the students don't come to you and say, hey, I can't do this, how do I do this and that. It's an administrative nightmare in some cases, depending on how well your students are at figuring that out. Tim?
When you go into account settings, can't you link your Canvas account to Google and that helps?
Yes,
It's not
if
perfect, but it helps.
you are a student and you have gotten the instructions to do so.
Yeah, I know, there's still admin there, I'm just,
Yeah. Is there a Canvas guide tutorial on that?
I don't think there's a Canvas guide tutorial on that. If you read through the community, you'll see my post and about 40 posts below it with the different things that I've tried. And things that you would have to tell. And there are other people that have said, yeah, we have this page that we hand out to the students or that we include in the documentation.
my way around it has been, remember I have a small class. I'll create a Google Doc, I'll make it public to the world, and I'll just put it into that group's mini homepage. So I
In
set
which-
up a group on Canvas, the group has its own homepage, and I'll create a page and embed the Google Doc within that page.
Yeah.
In which case you're using the people tab to create the group and you're not even using the collaborations thing, but you're using the assignments. And that's what I've done as well, rather than use that tool. Good news is Google is coming up with a course kit, which is supposed to be LMS agnostic, but allow for an easier way to do these things without relying on the LMS to come up with their different weird ways.
And then you just organize everything in Google Docs.
So, yeah, I make one, make sure it's okay, and then,
Okay. The only thing collaboration that I like is that it's slightly easier for me to organize than Google Docs is.
And one of the ways to take that one step further is to, when you create a Google Doc, we've got labs on this as well. But this
Yeah.
thing up on top here, it ends with, as long as the sharing is set up, so it ends with edit/edit. If you type /copy and you share that link, students will, so you can create a whole worksheet here. You take the /copy link, if your sharing is already set up, and again, like Tim, I set it up so that anybody with the link can get it, not just anybody within wisc.edu. Then I can take that, copy that, open it up in a new tab, paste it, and basically I'm showing you that if you put the link in there and they click on it, they will come up with this, and it says, would you like a copy of that? So if you have a worksheet that you want them all to fill out individually, you don't want a blank document, you want some questions that you put in there, this will make a copy in their own document that they can then turn in and submit as a Google file.
Okay, but you wouldn't automatically have access to that. They'd have to.
No, that would be a thing that in the assignment, they would have to submit it as a Google Doc. But it is a way to sort of quickly distribute worksheets that you easily.
I've been using that to distribute to instructors worksheets so that they're not going into my copy and making changes.
Right, great meta levels use. All right.
So Tim, the way that you were describing with doing this basically outside of collaborations but in groups, how does that work with the SpeedGrader? As far as, does it still, like with the collaborations, I can get their document and I can go through SpeedGrader and I can use my rubric. Can you do that same thing when it's done the way you're doing it?
I don't know. I haven't had it set up like that. I mean, the assignment is set up as a group assignment. They paste the URL into that assignment.
Okay.
So I do it that way, but there's still a step.
Okay.
My strategy has been to wait for them to fix that and just work around it until
it's fixed.
Yeah.
I've never used the groups pages, and I know that it creates a little Canvas website for the groups to work with. I've never used that at all. Do you use that extensively, or?
So our very first writing assignment is collaborative. So a group of 3 students writes the paper together. In the beginning, it was a little hard to get my head around and for the students to get around as well, because the little what do you call that? The file string at the top of the page.
Just to
go around back
trail.
to the big camp,
What is it?
to the course page.
To the cookie
Can be
trail.
a little confusing.
Are you talking about this part here?
Yeah. So when you're in a group.
Breadcrumbs. Crumb trail.
Breadcrumb trail.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's what I would call adjacent to your primary course.
Yeah.
So the weirdest part about it is that if you set up groups for your students, you can't click on that red thing on the far left, groups. If you click on that, you won't see it because you as an instructor don't get enrolled. So you actually have to go to people, then go to the groups, then go visit group homepage. So that's annoying, but what I usually do is just open 2 tabs.
Yeah.
And have 1 tab for the group open and 1 for the main page, main course website open, and navigate that way, but yeah.
Yeah, I had to kind of make a sheet to show students what they would see and how it's done. I just usually go through it in class once. And then they
The nice thing with the groups is the students have the power to do everything.
They do, and
They get admin power in their group.
Yeah.
Essentially.
And that is, so Aaron, to your question of what can we do for groups besides the discussion board, this is it.
Yeah.
They get a chance they can create their own course or chapter or module or whatever on whatever topic you want them to do. And then they can take this and then you can use it in your own class and they can build it all there and it becomes part of your class. Margaret.
Yeah, groups are good. I would just make a suggestion that when you create groups, be sure and put the course number.
Oh, yeah.
When the student
not
goes,
just one.
if you just say group 1, a student who has multiple courses clicks on that groups tab.
Yeah.
And there it is, great example.
Yeah.
Now, am I in
Yeah.
group one? Was that group one for this class or was it group one for the other class? Not group two.
So always put a prefix on your
Group
course.
1, 2. That's
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
It really helps, and you can, once the people are in the groups, they can actually come up with a team name, and then you can go back and change it to that name.
Can they do that? They can't do that. They have to have the instructor do that, right?
Yeah.
I don't think they can. But
Right.
Right.
I don't think so either, because I think you have to do that in the people of the main course,
that's right.
the people section where you make the groups. I think you have to change.
And that's actually a really good first step when you say, hey, you have a group. Step one of this assignment, come up with a team name. Let me know that what it is.
Right.
I mean, in some ways, that's a scaffolding thing that lets you know that they've at least started the assignment or started to look at it. So, and you can give them points for that, and that way you won't get something that's done the last minute, hopefully. Entirely.
John, go into one of the groups, just so people can see what tools are available to the groups. So it is sort of a group domain. We create pages, upload files, have discussions, make announcements, and it's all within your group. So it is a nice workspace if the students are willing to use it. I've had classes where the moment we're assigned a group, somebody sends an email outside of Canvas and says, I have Canvas, let's work on Google. And then the instructor cannot see your collaboration, which may be part of your grade. And I've had to say to my classmates, no, we really need to keep it in here because an instructor wants to see activities. So you may
Right.
even have to say to them, I understand you don't want to work in here, let's show you, you gotta show your work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To this, I think Tim's point of the rights that the students have. For students, it's terrible to upload an image in a discussion forum. It's just a huge pain in the butt. For instructors, it's less of a pain in the butt. So when they are given the group, it's less of a, they all have the less than a pain in the butt magic to be able to do that. It's still not easy as it should be. So it's still much easier in Google Docs to be able to just copy and paste into it, but Canvas is a slowly evolving thing. Margaret.
One of the things that may help groups, and maybe you try this, is to, as an instructor, prompt an initial discussion. And one of the ways I do that as a student is I put a discussion on the group board that says, hey, I'm Margaret, let's get to know each other, upload a picture of your pet. Okay, it's fairly benign. You don't have a pet, upload a picture or whatever. And it gets people through that initial struggle of how to upload a file in Canvas and have it display in your HTML. Because it's something people have to learn. So once they get past that and they begin to engage in the group, they realize, hey, there's files, and when you go into the file structure, oh, here's my, submissions folder, or my discussion folder, where that image will be uploaded. It's not real intuitive unless someone really does have experience, with these online things. But starting with just a basic discussion.
So that idea of modeling is, I think, a good one. And I'm going to say model multiple examples, because one of the things that's really difficult is if you only give them one example, what will they do? They will exactly copy that example because they know that that is the way that it should look. This is what is acceptable. There may be other ways, but I don't know what they are. So to be safe and to save myself a lot of time, I'm just going to exactly copy that example. If you have multiple examples, you give them a choice, and anytime you can give students choice, that engages them a little bit further. It gives them a sense of agency. It gives them a sense of the ability to make their own decisions, to be involved in their learning in a way that's not just I accept what you give me, but I can actually have some stance in this. Have past students create things. While they love you, you are an authority figure, whether you want to be or not. Past students have had this experience of dealing with you. Hearing from them on how to deal with you helps your current students sort of understand you. All right, so and in some ways, this is the role of community and peers. Let's talk just a little bit more about actually, I just talked about, that's learning preferences. So that's the idea of unique learning preferences, right? We all have different ways, skills that we bring to the table, to the classroom. And, I might really be good at absorbing content by reading. Somebody else might be really good at hands-on stuff. If you can give them those choices, and if you show them that there are a variety of choices available, this is a good thing. Let's talk a little bit about how we hate to talk to other peers and learn with other people. What's up with that?
Don't like people.
Why are we so antisocial as students? And it's not antisocial necessarily.
The problem that my students often come up with when working with a peer, when doing a peer review for a paper, is that my peer is not as good as my instructor in terms of the feedback.
So the students say, hey, why am I learning from, Kenny here? I should be learning from you, Dr. Professor Distinguished so-and-so, right? This is why I'm paying you the big bucks.
I don't know if that's just an ESL thing.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
What do we say to that? All right.
What do we say to that?
I don't know. Is this your?
I had another thing that I've been noticing in more recent years
Okay.
of undergraduates, which is similar to what Tim was talking about, and that's just their level of self-confidence in general and the level of anxiety that they're coming in with is so much higher than it used to be. And I don't know if that's a result of social media and slamming that goes on in there or what, but just in general, I've seen a huge change in the last probably 5-8 years of anxiety and just general self-confidence.
So not only is it, I don't want to learn from my peers because my peers don't know anything, but also I'm not in a position to give you feedback because
I don't trust myself.
I don't trust myself. I'm not the expert in this classroom.
The way I respond to that in group activities where we have kind of a teach learn instead of a jigsaw setup, we tell them that one of the best ways to learn something is to teach it. And
Right.
so that's
Right.
mainly the comeback. And that also in other areas, it's okay to be wrong. It's it's not the end of the world if you get one thing wrong. Someone will correct you or you'll correct yourself and then we will move on and you will have learned. So that's kind of how we try to approach it.
You can also model that.
Right.
Yeah, I tend to, especially early in the semester, just kind of put it out there like, I'm not always right either, and that's okay. Like I will, if I say something incorrect and you notice it, we'll work through that. And or if I don't know something right away, I'll find out. And that I think that also helps. Like if I'm fallible, it's okay for them to be fallible too. It's working through it and kind of learning something.
Yeah, it's not just modeling failure, right? It's also modeling resistance. So yeah, I just stumbled. I made a big fool of myself in front of my huge internet audience, but also the live people, right? But exactly, I'm here to learn. So, Margaret.
I would just add that for peer reviews, I think it's very helpful to give the students some guidelines or even a rubric to understand if I'm going to give feedback to my peers, what exactly is the expectation? And there's nothing worse than getting feedback on an assignment and the feedback just doesn't even relate to the intention of, I might say, well, there's not enough graphics. Well, this isn't a graphic novel, right? So understanding what are the guidelines, what are the expectations, and then a rubric that's very, very specific in many points, so they at least have a checklist, and not that they wouldn't provide additional feedback, but at least you get sort of a core guideline.
I have a couple of I think questions. One is when putting peer groups together, how do we do that? Is it kind of like ability or mixed ability, or are there other ways? And I don't know if this is getting too far into groups or peer reviews, which are different topics.
Which we're having labs on that you should come back to and bring buddies to.
Just plug that a little bit. The other one is, how does this work in a course which is curved? Does that happen here? curve.
I have a growth mindset. If everyone gets an A, everyone gets an
I'm like that too, but are there courses
So-
where that happens?
Here's an interesting story. When Marcus Brower came to talk about this, he's from the psychology department. They were infamous for curving, and then they did a lot of study on it, and they've looked at the literature, and they've stopped curving because it causes undue anxiety and stress for the students, and it doesn't actually result in improvements. So if you are curving, consider alternatives.
I had to curve in Korea, and it was just awful. It was awful.
Yeah, it's hard for instructors too.
They in fact show that it hurts the students who want to help the most.
Yeah,
So students with low confidence, students from
Because
non-traditional
I-
academic
I never
backgrounds tend to do the worst.
Do you have that article somewhere?
I would love to, like.
I'm pretty sure that we do have a link to it on the activity sheet for evidence-based learning activities from 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
Or, you can Google it and you'll find articles as well. Paul, to your point, I think that a lot of the reasons that curving existed was in the not so distant past when college was a filtering and sorting thing, when we wanted to find out, and some departments still want to do this, who are the creme de la creme of our class and who should really go find a different major, because we only want the top students in our class. So let's sort and filter out the undesirables. That wasn't part of the thinking when this came up. It was, let's be exclusive and elite. Margaret, and then Karen?
Yeah, I just want to add to the discussion. So you might have to look at target-based, learning so that you have very specific learning objectives. If you're going to stop curving, you need to have.
We don't curve.
Oh, you don't.
No, I was just curious,
Oh,
in
okay.
classes where there is a curve, how can you kind of foster that trust in your peers?
Well, you have all that competition, so how would you do it, right?
Yeah.
But I was going to say that target-based
Yes,
learning, target-based learning would have very specific learning objectives so that every student has an equal access or opportunity to succeed.
And I think this is also part of why the students hate group work, is because we have been socialized to do our own work to that, you're the enemy, you're the enemy, you're the enemy, so I'm not going to share any of my knowledge that I've gleaned from this, from my hard work with you and give you the easy way out based on my, being on my back, doing the hard work. Erin?
It just occurred to me that if you're doing a group peer work group, peer review or group work, that if you kind of frame it within that you're learning 21st century skills here. You have to learn how to deal with other people and give constructive feedback. If you say that outright, then maybe if that's an objective.
I think that's
Then-
really just connecting to real.
Yeah,
life.
right, and just say, hey, look, this is what you're doing.
Make it
So you're not
purposeful.
gonna be good at it right away.
Right.
You have to learn it.
Yeah, which is kind of where I was gonna go, and you had asked about how do we group people.
Yeah, a
And
little bit of.
I think that interest is a big part of that, that students will find more enjoyment, more engagement, more motivation from being with people who share some kind of interest.
Shifts.
So a couple of projects that I've done, groups have been determined solely by their interest areas, and I usually encourage them to be a little bit broad because it's really difficult to find somebody who has interest in something super specific, and but so when they're a little bit broad, I tell them to think about like academic disciplines or a course title or something like that. That gets their a good level of generality. But anyway, so putting them together in that way. So one class that I'm doing right now is on video games and learning. They have a small group discussion lead presentation, and where they have to find a research study that uses a video game to teach something. And so I had them write down 3 interests on a card the first day. And then I was able to get in small groups by shared interest. And some of the groups, like we had one group that 3 people put finance. I'm like, okay, that's pretty specific, but fine. Other people put like psychology or computer science, right? So I was able to put them, so they have that shared thing, but the course content part is it has to be a study using a video game to teach something in your interest area. So they have that shared. Somebody spoke to general things, not Canvas. I've done a project where small groups had to curate a resource page. Now, we did do that originally in Canvas, which we then discovered was, I'm not gonna say problematic in terms of it was difficult technically. Problematic in terms of all the students wanted to make sure they had access to the stuff they created after class and after they graduated. So we ended up transporting it into a WordPress, Pressbook is what I wanna say, Pressbook. And so in the future, if I did that project, I'd have students create their chapters in a Pressbook originally and just keep it public. So using those kind of open resources like Pressbook's a really fun way, but I think by and large, engagement is about giving them something that will motivate them to pursue. So problem-based kinds of learning, and I think we can figure out, certainly this is gonna vary by discipline, but I think there's even ways for, like, for example, a kinesiology class, right? Giving groups a person that they have to figure out what's wrong, or I don't know, a plan for wellness or something. Again, not my discipline, so I'm shooting there. But instead of just trying to find info, using information. That's always what drives me. How can I design something where students don't just collect it, but they utilize it in some way? Yeah.
So with Bloom's taxonomy, we're moving up the levels of thinking from understanding, remembering, not just we're to applying, to synthesizing, to the let's create something. And we know from learning sciences that construction of something based on material is so much more richer than some of these lower level things where we're just spewing things back out onto the test where it doesn't really mean anything. That individual motivation, if I can apply it in a way that is interesting to me, and this is why when you said curation, I was like, this is actually a learning preference thing. Because if you ask me to curate a whole bunch of things on X, Y, or Z, whatever the topic is, I will find those things that speak to me. And in doing so, I'm going to go through a whole bunch of other ones, which will have some sort of ancillary effect on me, impression every time I have to sort through things and say, does this apply, one, to the course content, to the specific thing that I'm being asked to look at? So I'm doing all of this. Is this, sorry, I want to say hot or not. That's not quite the right word. But, is this the thing? Does this work? And then 3, is it good enough to reflect who I am and my own personal interests in the topic so that it's personally meaningful to me? And I think that a lot of students do that even subconsciously. They don't think about, am I going to do this? But they just say, this one's dumb. I'm not going to do it. This one speaks to me. I am going to do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that touches on like the relevance of engagement. I always try to bring in or try to answer the question, why do I care about this? Why does this matter to me? And trying to bring in real world examples too. And all courses, all subjects, there's real relevance that's going on today, and just trying to bring in like news articles or things like that just to show that this doesn't just exist in this course vacuum, that it exists out there, and just showing that real connection, I think helps to bring that engagement. I was working with an instructor a few years ago, human biology, and we were going about different pieces. That's not my subject area. And we were touching upon like vaccinations. Now every time I hear the story about like the thing that's happening out west with vaccinations, like, hey, I get that, because it somehow became relevant to me working with her. But I think students, when they see that, it really kind of brings that connection a little bit more to them and helps them out. And it isn't always just like John has on there project-based learning, but just any type of learning, I think, too.
Real quick, I know he looks like he wants to leave. I'm putting down, no, it's quite all right. I wanted to make sure you knew I was doing this. I'm writing some of the influential literature so it's on the activity sheet and where I'm typing it. I just wanted to make sure you knew that. Sorry, Ron, go ahead.
I think sort of a thing we kind of touched on a little bit here, but if you want this sort of engagement in the class, I think part of it is you have to sort of make sure you're devoting time in class for them to do some of this. So, and especially with like a big lecture class, it's really hard to just kind of have the lectures and then expect them to just meet in groups and do all this stuff outside of class time. So I found that especially for like lab reports where I know there's gonna be a lot of stuff they have to do on it, or towards the end of the semester when my students have these big projects. I'll give them like an hour in class here and there to actually work on something. And then at the end of the semester, I actually have three-hour class periods of come in, like you can be a little late, I'll be flexible there, but like come in, work with your groups. Because I think with a lot of the sort of deeper engagement group work, one of the things that maybe why students hate it so much is if you're trying to do all of this outside of class and you're trying to work around other people's schedules, and then you get people to flake out, it's really harder to do that when it's like in class. So you have to be here anyway. And so you're gonna probably work on it more. And it gives them a space to, you know, you can still fail in a safe space because the TAs and the professor are right there to like ask questions. So I think if we really want them to engage deeper with the material, I think when we find that to be an important and valuable thing, I think we have to make time in class. Another example is my colleague Lynn, who's not here today, but she teaches a similar class, except she's got Monday, Wednesday, Friday lectures, and then they meet for lab once a week. So seminar presentation or presenting research articles is sort of one of their main objectives. So that class on Mondays, they don't meet in the lecture hall. They split out into smaller groups of 9 or 10 in different classrooms with different instructors. And then each week a student is presenting a paper and they have like a discussion. So that's just one lecture a week that is now something different, but they get the deeper engagement aspect of it. So I think you can, even in a lecture class, you can find ways to say I'm going to devote one of these 3 periods will be fully like interactive in some way.
And let's keep talking about that in the last few minutes, these different spaces and what that looks like. Is it just a matter of scaling up what works in a small thing, or is it a different animal? I think in some ways, part of the reason that we look at group work, especially in larger classes, is to create some of that intimacy that we have in the smaller classes. In a seminar where I have 15 people, I can say, let's have this conversation. In a 200-person lecture, we cannot have a decent conversation with 200 people. But if I break it into small groups, you can have a small conversation in and amongst yourself. There's another element of efficiency with group work in large lectures and in the online space. In a large lecture, if I've got 200 students and I've got groups of 10, now I've got only 10 things to grade instead of 200 things to grade, or a group of 10 is too big. So let's do, let's change that around. Online is a hard space because in a classroom, I can immediately look around and say, oh, Kenny's watching the game right now, and Megan's engaged and whatever, right? In an online space, I cannot do that. So it's harder for me to keep track, but if you are in a small group where you are accountable to your other group members, there will be some, not self-policing, but sort of group policing, and maybe some self-policing as well, as to am I pulling my weight in this group of 3 or 5 that people are counting on me to do things. This is especially true if you have assigned them roles, right? Am I holding up my role instead of, if you don't give them roles, then I'm just going to let these 2 do the work and I'm just going to see where they take us. But if you give them roles, then they'll do that. In an online course, in a lecture course even, if I stand up here and I talk to 200 people and I answer a question from there and I answer a question from there and I answer a question from here and I answer a question from there, I've answered 4 or 5 questions, and I feel at the end of the day, I have engaged the class. I had questions from all parts of the groups of the room, and I haven't. There's somebody who totally I missed and they didn't get anything out of it. But in an online space, in order to be engaging, I have to double check that I engage every single person. So it's not just 5 people. It's, did I hear from Kenny today? No. Did I hear from Paul today? No. Did I hear from, yes, no, yes, no, no. And I have to do that. And it's so much more work. So again, we do that and we can see that in an online space because did submit a discussion post, did not submit a discussion post, like we can easily quantify that. But it's not just a matter of did and didn't, right? Because we often feel like we have to check to see, Did he say something of use, of value? Did it have these 4 things to it? We don't do that in an online, in a lecture space. So it's a lot more work to scale it up in an online space.
Sort of related to online discussion boards, I haven't really looked at too many discussion like tools outside of Canvas, but I do know I hate the Canvas discussion board because it's so linear and so like, I don't even want to look at it, ever. So.
Especially for large groups.
Yeah,
So
you
much
can make
scrolling.
smaller groups,
Yeah.
but even then, it's like you have to scroll constantly.
Yes.
They did add a collapse feature, I noticed,
Yeah.
which is cool, but the thing I've tried a couple times, and actually I took an online course, and it was like my favorite part of what we did is doing a semi-jigsaw type activity. So you essentially create a Google Doc with a table of some kind, or however you set it up, maybe you have questions. And then if you have a small group of 4 to 7 students, you just make sure there's in the instructions that they should pick a color that they're gonna write with. And then, whatever the task is, they can respond to each other. And I think part of the problem I have with discussion boards is it's so spread out. Like your question might appear and you might have 10 responses and it's just, you're scrolling. But when you do something where they can provide feedback sort of next to something, I think it feels more like a discussion because you can the responses are more connected. And I don't know if that's like a visual thing for me, but so finding other ways to create conversations that aren't necessarily a discussion board. Because I don't know, even when I was a student or if I'm an instructor, I feel like it's such a forced way to make people talk to each other. And it's not how you wouldn't in a group discussion like each person would say. So, I don't know, it just feels very static. Yeah.
So I know what a jigsaw is, but I'm trying to visualize, was this set up in a page?
Yeah,
how did you set this up?
During our week of cold, I created like a little thing, which was they had to do like a short writing activity and give feedback, which we had done in class before. So instead I created sort of like a quiz that they do some of the brainstorming on their own, and then they were supposed to go to their group page, find the docs, it was a doc, and then they would put like what they wrote, and then they were supposed to comment on other people's, and then as a group kind of come up with something. So it was like a table in a a Google Doc page, so that you could like add comments places. So the actual jigsaw, I call it a jigsaw activity. I don't know if that's what it was. It's like a writing activity, but the idea like each person's coming with some kind of knowledge, and then they're having some kind of conversation, and that conversation was happening on a Google Doc.
And they couldn't get to that doc until after they completed the quiz?
I mean, they could have like gone, but the instructions for it were at the end of the quiz, like, oh, okay, you're done, now go here. So they wouldn't know to go there until.
Got it, okay.
And you're not the only person who uses Google Docs for discussions because it's so collaborative.
Yeah.
It's got the chat window on the side.
Exactly.
There's up on the ATLE journal, I brought up the Canvas discussion with Morton Gernsbacher. She's got a really interesting way of doing this where they have a discussion and they only use the chat window in Google Docs. So the Google Doc itself might have have the prompt, and then they do their discussion on the chat. Because it has who they are and the timestamp and things like that, they will have a synchronous discussion. They copy this, they paste it into the Google Doc, they turn in the Google Doc to her. It's all separated by who said what at what time, and it's a much easier thread for an instructor to sort of look at and follow, so the students don't have to, oh, I'm typing in blue here, now I have to, down here I've got to like copy something in blue or change my font color again so that I'm in blue again instead of black by default. So it's kind of a neat thing. I encourage you to, again, if you go to the ATLE journal, which is this little link right here on the activity sheet, she's got full explanation on how to do this, but it's very similar to what you were talking about as far as the students have different roles. She has also done things where they jigsaw, where she'll take an article or she'll take 3 different articles and say, all right, you're author number 1, you're article number 2, and you're article number 3. 1, 2, 3, get together and come up with, you are the expert, you're the expert, and you're an expert based on your article. Use it as you talk, but figure out a solution that uses all 3 elements of the article, 3 different articles. Jigsawing is fantastic. We are out of time. We have 1 minute left. Is there anything we have not talked about that we want to make sure that we at least address? And again, I'll have the room open here, so if it's an in-depth discussion, I can continue to stay here. But I want to be respectful of everyone else's time. All right, if not, thank you for coming. And again, on your way out, check a few boxes. If you want to have a follow-up discussion or a lab, please write it on there and let us know what it is, and we'll try to make it happen in the fall. Thank you.